did.
Okay. Thanks, Mxolisi. Okay, we can move on to Neo. Yes, Neo.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Neo?
Ay, kuningi. I'm okay. I wanted to ask because you just said that will determine with how one good is. So if I don't know if it's a strange or stupid question that I'm asking, if then one is not good, because I speak for myself when I say it's a slightly a bit of a new experience with me with Java, especially with the algorithms as well.
Mm.
Does that mean that you guys get to cut somebody off the boot camp?
I wouldn't say that we cut someone off based on such, but it's always important for you to push yourself, right? To do better. It's the same as, for example, when you guys asked us whether you should delete your repos that you created at a later stage, and we were like, no, you can't delete them. You have to refer back and look at your code and be like, oh, this is where I started from, but you can now trace back and say that, yo, I've really grown and I've really gained like a lot of skills, you know. So I wouldn't say that we would really cut you off, but it's always best to do like your best, even if it's your first time experience, but you should just always try to do the best.
All right, no, I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you now. Okay. Sunisani, I still can't hear you. I still can't hear you. You're trying to speak. Can you type? Because I can see on the chat that you're trying to speak, but I can't hear you. And then Alec as well. Alec, I still can't hear you, Alec. Can you also type as well? And then yeah, I think that that's about it for the Q&A for now. We'll take questions later on today. And then the man of the moment has arrived, Mr. Sizwe. I think you can now start with your session. Are you good?
Yeah, morning everyone. Uh, am I good? Not really, but yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
Whew. Let's go. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see?
Yes, we can.
All right. So I just pushed to GitHub, just a little something so that we can code along. So I shared the link on the chat. So you could just go to that link and then clone and open up the repo right there. And then we can start working. For people that, are not quite adept to GitHub, may I ask the facilitators to assist in the group chat to ensure that the guys have their code running. Um, However, I think I will push this code when we are done. I think. I'll still think about it. But yeah, just clone the repo and then code along if you can, and then if you can't, just take notes on what I'm doing, and then you guys will work on it in your own time. With that being said, good morning, everyone. I hope you are feeling refreshed and ready to go down, right? So I'm just gonna run I'm gonna run the server and just do that. So basically this is what I have, it's just simple, it's nothing really complicated. So this is a simple e-commerce website. So okay. So what's our objective here? We need to be able to add our items to a cart uh on the press of a button, and we should be able to increment the number of cart items here, and then we should be able to view our cart items um right here. So that's just the basics, right? It's just basics right here. And then for that to we're going to integrate our JavaScript into our HTML, and then we're gonna be talking about DOM, right? So document object model. So obviously, usually what happens is that I try to go in detail, but because of time and all, I just have a few notes to touch bits and pieces. But obviously, it's up to you guys to read more and read more on your own time and do a lot of research, etc., etc. And to answer, I heard a question earlier on the approach to do certain things. I really recommend you not to use the same approach that I did. It would be nice to see a different approach, but still sticking to what's required of you, right? So anyway, you can have a prompt, it's fine. Just make sure that you're still answering the question and you're solving the problem. How you solve the problem, is totally up to you. And yeah, so if I say solve this problem using a do while loop, don't use a while loop. Use a do while loop, but have your own approach to it on how you do it, but still solve the problem, because that's how you will be assessed anyway on how you solve, on if the problem is solved and it was solved using a do while loop, etc., etc. All right, so yeah. I was just rambling to give everyone time to clone, but now I'm just gonna start. Yeah. So in our HTML file, we have our HTML file and we have our initial code that's on GitHub. Basically, we have our nav bar container, and then we have our H1 for e-commerce website, and then we're gonna have in our nav, we're going to have an unordered list where we render our list items for the home products, the contact and the cart count as well. And then this is basically inside our header tag, and then we're going to have our main section where where we are listing all our products inside of the product container. And then we're going to have our product card and assign an ID to it. And then we're going to have our image tag and then have a link to our our image link, which is inside our assets folder right here. And then so on and so forth. Have a price, have a P tag for our price and H3 for the name of the product. And then we're gonna have a button to where we should be able to add to cart, etc., etc. Right? And then below, we're just gonna have a section for our cart, our shopping cart, where we're gonna have or rather render the cart items right there. And then we just have a simple footer here to say that this is my e-commerce website, etc., etc. Um, And then here we have our CSS. Basically, we're styling all our elements inside our HTML. And yeah, I'm not gonna go through this. But would suggest that you guys play around with this. And I think in the task, the task that you guys are gonna get, you're gonna have it's basically gonna be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So yeah, I hope you guys have fun with that. With that being said, um, let us begin with the job or the work of the day. So, inside our script file, script.js, I'm just gonna write a few notes. So, what is document object model, right? Which is known as DOM. So basically, when a browser when a browser load ah, when a browser loads an HTML document, right? It converts the HTML document into a document object, right? And then the document object basically is basically the root node of the HTML document, right? So in the context of DOM, it refers to the root node refers to the topmost node of the document tree, right? So for an HTML document, the okay, let me just write. For the HTML document, this root node is the HTML element right there. So it basically serves as the parent for all the other nodes. Okay, so let's just say that again. So in the context of DOM, the root node refers to the topmost node of the document tree. So for the HTML document, the root node is the HTML element. It serves as the parent for all the other nodes. So they're talking about this now, right? So this represents the root of the HTML document, right? So the browser is gonna load this entire document. It's going to load this entire document right here, and then it's going to convert that into HTML document. It's going to convert the HTML document into a document object. All right, so now let's move to CSS selectors. So what are CSS selectors and what do we use them for? So CSS selectors are used to find or select the HTML element that you want to style. Okay. Now, CSS selectors, right? They are split into 5 categories, namely like simple CSS selectors and attribute selectors, but we're just gonna mainly focus on the get element by ID, query selector all, and event listener, right? So so this so for simple selectors, right, which is we're just gonna focus on simple selectors and attribute selectors. It's basically simple selectors selects elements based on name, ID, and class, right? And then attribute selectors. This basically selects elements based on an attribute. Now keep this in mind because this is going to be very important, right? And then so if we're trying to get an element by an ID, we're gonna use this. Basically, this is a method that returns an element with a specified value. Now, obviously, there are more to this than what I'm presenting, but what I'm talking about is for the sake of the session. Obviously, when you guys do more research, you'll see that there's more to it, right? So maybe just to add on here, uh, the get element by ID method is basically it can also be used to read um to read or edit what is this element, right? So then we have query selector all. And this method basically returns all elements that as a CSS selector. So as selected, right? So what else? How does it return these elements? Is basically we return them in a form of a node list, right? Um, which is an array, not exactly an array like collection of node objects. I'll show you what this looks like when we start talking about this. And I guess so I guess now the differences between a node list and an array. So we'd say that a node list a node list basically is it's a provided is node lists provide a language independent way to access DOM elements, right? And then for arrays are basically JavaScript objects that are used to store a collection of items as we spoken earlier on, right? So just gonna write yeah. collection of items. Whoops. All right. So we have that. We have that. We need to add one more, which is an event listener. To add an event listener, and basically, add event listener is basically a method, that basically a method that attaches an event or an event handler, right? So, for example, if we want to attach a click, where we need to add a click event, and we would use an event listener method. Yep. So pretty much straightforward, right? So when we use these methods as per selectors, CSS selectors, just pay attention to what happens. You might be confused on what is get element by ID or query selector, or but all of that will be answered in a short while. So hmm, so let's go back to our site and let's figure out what is our first move. So I'd say that the first move right here is to ensure that our add to cart button works. And then when you add to cart, we need to have either an array, we need to have an array where we add to cart, and then we need to loop through that cart to show the elements. And then lastly, we need to be able to increment the number of items that are in the cart right here, and then render all those cart items here. And lastly, we need to be able to remove those items in the cart, right? So, okay, now let us begin. So now I'm gonna have a cart variable and set it to an array, right? And then what what we need to do now is have a variable, where we're gonna have a variable for our basically get an element by an ID for our card count. So basically we need to get this, not that, this element, and then we need to be able to add or rather to increment this card count. So we need to get this element right here by its ID. So for that, we're gonna have a variable, card count. I'm just gonna call it a variable card count element, and how I'm gonna select it is to say document. So HTML document, and then get element by ID. So what I understand by this, right, is that we are going to look in the document, basically the whole web page, and then find an element with ID card count, right? I'm just gonna copy and paste that so that I don't make mistakes. So yeah, find an element with an ID card count and then store that element inside the variable card count element, right? And then I'm going to do the same with cart items, right? So I'll say const cart items element, right? And I'll say document dot get element by ID. And let's see, just gonna copy and paste that right there. So the next step now actually is to I need to be able to get all the products, right? So I need to get all the products by the class name, by their class name. So if I go back here inside my HTML document, I'm going to use, so if I use, for example, I'm going to use no, add to class, add to cart class, right? So basically, what the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm not gonna, when I click, I'm clicking add to cart. So I need to identify this entire product by the add to cart button, right? So for that so basically what I'm saying is if I click on add to cart, I need to know that I clicked on, I'm adding product one to cart, right? So how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna select this product by the element that I'm clicking on, this add to cart button. And this should give me the information of the entire product, right? So how I'm going to do that is that I'm going to use query selector, right? So I'll say that inside, so I'll say document dot query selector all, right? And then query selector all dot add to see add to cart right there. So again, let us go back. What am I saying here? So I'm selecting all the HTML elements on the page that have the class add to cart, right? So by using this dot here, it signifies that I'm selecting a class add to cart, right? And then this basically is going to return all elements. It's going to return um all the elements that have this add to cart button. But now it's not just going to return this button. It's going to return this whole thing right here. So basically, what I'm saying is that think of it as saying that find every element that has an add to cart label, and then we're going to attach a certain behavior to it, right? So now we're going to use for each, right? So we're going to loop through it. Remember, query selector or returns a node list, a form of a node list, which is like an array, right? So we can use for each to loop through it, right? So I'm gonna have a button here. So for each is for each basically is the same as yeah, I don't want to say the same as, But think of the for each method as a for loop, right? So if we say the difference between for each and a traditional for loop. Basically, with for each is basically, to be honest, it's cleaner. And it's cleaner and it's the best way uh to loop through an array, and we're basically going to be iterating through array and then doing the same thing for every item inside the array without adding a skip or break, right? I don't know if you remember, the other day we used the for each, I mean, not for each, we used the for loop, right? And then we had a certain condition where after a certain condition is met, we break out of that loop. Now with for each, we won't be able to break as it's going to iterate strictly through every item, right? But now if we want to get a little more creative, we use a for loop where the for loop is more powerful and flexible in such a way that if we need to stop the loop early, we can, or if a certain condition is met, of course, or we need to await. So await basically is asynchronous programming, right? Which probably gonna touch when we talk about when we start talking in Node. So in a sense, for each is synchronous, and then the for loop is asynchronous. Right. And then additionally, we can add complex logic in our for loop, right? So now, because we're not going to use a for loop because we're going to iterate through each item and then each item is basically going to have the same behavior. We're going to add logic of the same to every item. In this case now, the item is going to be a button element, right? So skis. So let's have um um okay. So remember the button here is our add to cart, right? So we need to say button dot we need to add an event listener to our button. So say click. So we need to have a click event on our button, right? So basically, you basically click and then we listen to, it's like when you click on it and then you're listening to what's going to happen. So if we click, something should happen, right? So we're going to pass a callback function that adds a click event to each button, right? So let me just say clicked. Right here. And then let's see what happens. So I'm just gonna open inspect and just go to console and see what happens. So if I click, see, it responds right there. Okay, so we are doing the right thing. Let me just do that. So we added an event listener to every add to cart every button, add to cart button, right? So okay. Now we need to know which button was clicked, right? Or rather, which product was clicked. right? Because remember, if I click here, I need to know that this button refers to this product right here. So we need to get the product, we need to get basically this product right here, the entire div, the entire element, right? And how we're gonna do that is we're gonna say we're gonna have a variable product card, and then we're gonna say the button element dot closest, and then closest class, right? So the closest class will be product card, like that. Okay, Mr. Caesar, let's pause there and let's try to understand what's going on. So our click event, basically, we need to get the product card, right? We need to get information about the card. So the closest method helps us to do. It helps us find the nearest parent element with the class product card, right? So if I click on this button, who is the closest what is the closest parent element? So if I click on this one right here, the closest parent element is this one right here. And that is because we're saying that we're identifying the closest parent parent element by a product with by a class product ID. So that is basically what's happening right here. So I'll have our product card. Maybe let's see what product card looks like. Mm. Mhm. So if I click here, this is our product card right here. So this is the parent element closest to our card add to cart button right here. So this is for product one because we clicked product one. Now let's see what product two looks like. You see with the product two right there. So if I click on add to cart for product three, we get the parent element for product three right there, right? So that is basically what's happening right here. So we're able to access our product card, right? Now, um, we need to get product ID now because, okay, I'll explain that later. So how are we gonna get our product ID? Maybe let me just go back here. Mhm. Oh, our comment that can put it out. So if I click on add to cart here, we need to identify, we need to have basically a unique identifier, right? Which is basically an ID, a unique ID. So for our product here, we have a data ID basically here, an ID of one for product one. And basically what we're saying is we need to get the value of a custom attribute like this. We're using an attribute data ID to get the ID of this entire product, right? Um, so yes, that's how we're gonna get an ID, and I'll explain why we're using an ID later. So how do we get the ID of our product card? We're gonna say product card dot get attribute. Now, what kind of attribute are we looking for? We're looking for data ID. And then if we log what product ID looks like. And just comment product card. So if I click on product one, the ID of product one is 1, the ID of product 2 is 2, and the ID of product 3 is 3, right? So now I'm able to get the ID of our product. Now the next step is to get the name of our product, which is this. And then we're also going to be able to get the price, right? So we need to get these two. And how are we going to do that? So let me just have a variable for product name. And I'll say that, so we need product name from product card. So product card dot, we're going to use query select, and then we're going to get H3. So what does query selector mean? Now, it's a bit different to query selector or such that when we pass an H3 tag like this, basically we're gonna say that basically what's happening is that we're gonna go inside our product card. We're gonna go inside our product card and we're gonna say identify an elements with H3, right? But identify the first element that has H3. So the first element inside our product card is this one right here. Is this one right here. So if I log that out, and then if I click on product, add to cart for product one, as you can see, now we have a H3 element, right? So with a query selector, it gets the first element that has been specified inside it, right? So if I go back to a code and let me add another H3 element, and let me just give it a name of H3, no? And then let me go back and add H no add H1. You see? It's not calling the H3 element of H3. It's calling the first one for product. But if I switch the order now, and then I have H3 for H3, and rather let me call it H, you know? So if I click add to cart now, and then I say I say query selector H3. What this basically means, it says find the first H3 tag that you have in this product card. So now you see it's finding H instead of this H3 that product one. So that is basically what queries. Let me remove this. So that is basically what query selector does. It says go inside product card, and then inside inside this element, this div element, find a tag, find the first H3 tag and return it. And that's basically what we've done. But for the sake of this problem, we don't want the entire element. We rather want what's inside, right? We want the name product one. So additionally, I'm going to say that dot inner text like that. And therefore, when we add to cart, there we find the product name right there, like that, product one. Now let's do the same thing for price, for product price. So I'm going to say product card dot query selector. So what's the tag? What's the HTML tag for our price? It's a P tag, right? So inside our query selector, I'm going to pass P like that, right? But since we want the what's inside, I'll say inner text like that, right? And now, okay, now we have the information that I need. I needed the ID, I needed the name, and I needed the price. Now, we have all that we need to be able to add items, or rather a product into a card. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a variable product. And then this variable is the value of this variable is basically going to be an object, right? It's going to be an object variable. And then what am I passing inside my object? I'm passing ID. I need to have ID property, and the value of this property is going to be product ID. Additionally, the name of the product, right? And then I'm passing product name and the price. And I'm passing product price. So all of the information that I got from our product card, I'm gonna pass it as an object right here. Right. So I'm creating an object and then I'm passing the values for the ID, the name, and the price. Right. But lastly, we are missing one thing. We need to have quantity. So initially, when you add an item into the cart, initially, the quantity is going to be one. So here's why we're using ID instead of the name. So if I add, so this is our product, right? Obviously, as it looks on the screen, we have product 1, 2, and 3. So seemingly it makes sense to identify these products by their product name, right? Now, what if you have a situation where you have our product name is sneaker and sneaker, right? Sneaker one and sneaker one, or rather Nike sneakers, Nike sneaker. And then we have inside our cart, we have Nike sneaker and Nike sneaker. Now, obviously the name is the same, so you might use that to identify this product with the name. But what if this one sneaker is black and the other sneaker is white? Now that means this basically means that these are two different products right here, but they have the same name. So how are you going to differentiate between black sneaker and white sneaker? So that is why we use the product ID. Is basically think of it this way. A mother has twins, right? Identical twins. Now, when you look at them, they are the same, but they have to have different names. We have to be able to differentiate between Mpo and Ponyana, right? So the one will have the ID, a certain ID, and one will have a certain ID. We can even give them the same name, but their DNA, their fingerprint is not the same. By that meaning that they don't have the same ID. So think of it the same as here. Products can have the same name, they can look the same, but they have to have this a different ID because an ID is basically a unique identifier. I hope that makes sense. So now, if sneaker one and sneaker two, right, will have the different IDs. But if we add the same sneaker, like sneaker black, into the cart, now we're gonna use the quantity instead of adding the entire product inside the cart. We'll just increment the quantity, and that's why we're adding quantity inside our um inside our inside our object, right? Oof, I've said a mouthful, but hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Um, Let me log what product looks like. So if I add product two, this is what our product looks like right there, right? So we have ID, product, name of the product, the price, and the quantity. So even now I can click on this. It's still going to give me the same information. We're not incrementing the quantity, but we'll get to that later. For now, what we want is to be able to add this product inside a cart or in a cart. So what we need to do now is to have a add to cart function. So I'm going to declare a function, or rather define a function for add to cart, right? And I'm going to have a parameter, define a parameter of product right there, right? Now, inside inside our add to cart, before we get there, basically what I want us to do is that every time we click on add to cart button, every time we click on add to cart, we need to be able to call this function right here. So if I go inside of our event list now, and so if every time I click on this button right here, I need to call our add to cart function, right? So I need to pass the product as my argument, this product right here. So now let's see if it's working properly. So uh, remember that we need to add this product inside our cart. So for that to happen, we need to call our function inside the click event and then pass the product as an argument. Now, inside of our function, once we set that product as a parameter, we can see which product has been added to cart, right? So for demonstration purposes, let's add product one. And then as you can see, product one is added to cart, right? Let's add product two. Product two is added to cart. Let's add product three. Product three is added to cart, right? Okay, great. So let's go back to our function. Let's add a bit of logic into our function. Now, we have our cart variable, which is which has a value of an empty array. So this is our cart, right? Now, what we need to do is that when we add an item inside our cart, we need to check if that item or exists in a cart. So we need to have a check to say cart item. Let's declare variable for cart item, right? And then we're gonna say cart dot find. Before you panic, find is an array method. Okay, let me write this before and then I'll explain. Item ID is equals to product dot ID. So what's going on here is that we are checking to see if the item is already in the cart. Now, how are we checking that item? We're checking that item by its ID, right? So essentially, this find method here, it's basically we're gonna loop it. We loop inside our cart array, and then we're gonna pass item as our parameter, right? Remember, this is basically a callback function, right? And then we have a parameter and then we're passing an item, right? And then we're checking the item's ID inside the cart. So we're saying, hey, Mpo, let's scan your fingerprint. So let's say we found Mpo in our cart, but before we add another Mpo, we need to check if Mpo already exists in the cart. So we're gonna use Mpo, the one that we have in our hand before we find him in the cart. Then we check for the ID. Then we say, okay, Mpo does not exist. So let's add Mpo into the cart. But if Mpo exists in the cart, then we need to increment the quantity of Mpo to say there are two Mpos in our cart. If that does not make sense, I don't know what does. But basically, here we're checking to see if item already exists. Cart. That's basically what we're doing. And yeah, and the purpose of this, the purpose of this is to avoid product duplicates. Instead, increase quantity. Hopefully that makes sense now. So what if, okay, let me log what card item looks like. So now let's add product to cart, or rather, let's click on this. Cart items is undefined, right? Now, why is cart item undefined? That is because our cart item is empty, right? We're not we're not physically putting anything in the cart at this point. So our cart item is empty. So basically what's going on is that we have product ID. Product ID, we have it is true because we're passing it here now. So product ID is true. However, because the cart is empty, there is no item in the cart, and therefore this is empty. So this entire expression right here is false. So once this is false, it means that there is no item inside. This product is not found in our cart. So therefore it's undefined. So we need to say, okay, so if this thing is undefined, or rather, if it's true, right? If we have a cart item, or rather an item is found in the cart, that means we need to avoid a duplication or duplicate of that product. So that means we have to increment the quantity. So if item is true, then we need to say cart item dot quantity plus plus, right? So we're increasing the quantity. And if cart item is undefined, meaning that there's nothing inside the cart, or rather this product does not exist in the cart, we need to now push this item in the cart. So we need to say cart dot push. And then we pass product like this. So what's happening here? Let me let me say that again. Remember, at this point, there's nothing in our cart, right? So when we say find, when we go inside our cart and then say find this product in the cart, it's undefined because there's nothing inside our cart. So now we're saying, how do we handle this? So we're saying that if cart item is undefined, then we push this product in our cart item, right? And then we're passing product right here. So remember, the push is basically it's another array method, right? That basically pushes products or pushes an element in the array. In this case, this element is an object element, and then we're pushing it inside our array. But if cart item is not undefined, or rather it's true, meaning that that item exists and then that item ID is equal to the product ID, then we just add a quantity to avoid duplication, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So now let's console log if to see that we're doing the right thing. So let's cart item. Let's have cart item here. And then here, let me just add a note to say if the product does not already exist in the cart, then add that product to cart. Right? Now let's see what's going on. So I want a sneaker in my cart. So let me add this. Right? Yeah. Oh, 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 oh. Let me start that again. So let me add this, right? Nothing happens. Okay, no. Let me do something. Let me add. So if the cart item is undefined, then I'll say cart item is undefined because does not exist in this product does not exist in cart now. And then let's say so okay. Let us log cart. Okay, what do I want to demonstrate here? I want to demonstrate that if cart item is undefined, then we should print a message to say that cart item is undefined because product does not exist, right? And then we push the product to cart, and then we console log the cart, and to say that product added to cart. All right. Okay. Let's see. Let's hope that makes sense. So let me add sneaker. So cart item is undefined because the product does not exist in the cart item now. And then now we push to the cart. We push the product to the cart, and then we have our cart now. Now our cart means product is added. So now we have the product in our cart, right? So let's add the same product to the cart and see what happens. Now you can see that the same product is added to the cart, but now instead of pushing to the cart, right? Because now cart item exists, instead of pushing that product again, now because cart item now is true, meaning it's not undefined anymore. Now we increment the quantity, right? Which is, as you can see now, the quantity is 2. we increment the quantity, and then we console log the cart item. So instead of pushing it, now we are incrementing the quantity, right? So now I hope this if else statement makes sense, right? So I'm just gonna comment that out. So let me go back here. Let's see, when I add to cart, nothing happens on our cart counter here. And then we're not adding anything in our shopping cart. So now we have to add logic to make this thing make this counter, or rather count how many items are in the cart, and additionally display the objects inside our cart, right? So we are good with add to cart now. So now, which means that we have to have a function that's going to update this information. Phew. What will I do now? What will I call this function? So I need to have a function that will update this element and add to this div element right here. So I'll call it update. So I'll say update cart function, right? Like that. So let me just add a message here to say cart update. And then where are we calling? So when we add to cart push, right? Yeah. So either way, whether or not, okay, it's not okay. Yeah. Let's call it outside. So we need to, well, every time we add to cart, we need to call our update function, because every time we're adding to cart, something is being updated somewhere. So we need to call this function in here. So but by that, now let's add some logic, right? So let me just remove that. That's not necessary. Now we need to I know what's the first thing I said? We need to update this right here. We need to update this, which is that, right? So I will say, remember we defined this. We defined this variable here. There it is, cut count, right? Cut count element, yeah. So we are going to use this variable now. He's been quiet for so long. So now we have to say cut count element, right? And then we uh, actually let's see what cut count element looks like. Let us not assume. And then yeah. So if I click add to cart, yeah, this is what cut count element looks like. So it's that element that I've been showing you in HTML. Okay. So what we want, remember what we want is this guy inside here, that inner text, this guy right here. So now we're able to identify the element. Now we need the inner text. So I'll say cut count dot inner text, right? And then the inner text is equals to. So because, oof, we have to increment. No? We are going to say we're going to have to go into cart. And basically, when we go into cart, we need to count the number of products inside that cart. Meaning, basically, what I'm saying is that we need to get the sum of items or sum of elements in the array. Remember, we did this problem the other day? We need to get the sum of all the elements inside the array. Which array? Our cart array. Now, remember the trick that we did? So we're going to say cart dot reduce. Ooh, I wouldn't be forgetting this if I was you. And remember, we said our parameters are going to be the accumulator. But in this instance, we're not going to use the parameter, we're not going to define our parameters accumulate. We're going to define it as the count, which is the total count of items in the array. And then we had another parameter of current value. And remember, in this case, our current value is going to be item. All right. And then we're going to say that count plus. Now remember, our item is an object. So how do we access the quantity? So we're going to say item dot quantity like that. So we're saying now, okay, before I continue, we are not really done now. Count has to have an initial value. We need to give count an initial value. So the initial value of count, we're going to set it to 0 like this. So essentially, what's going to happen is we're going to go inside of our cart, and then we're going to count how many products are in that cart and count the quantity of it as well. That's basically what's happening right here. So let's see if I'm not lying and if there are any bugs. See, it's working. It's working. All right. Okay. No bugs so far. Okay, so that is working nicely. What is the next step? Okay, well, let me. So this is accomplished now, no? Now we need to accomplish this now. We need to display the items inside our cart here, right? Now, oh, this is gonna be a pain, but no pain, no gain. So we need to have we need to have a check to check if is there anything inside our cart, right? And then if there's nothing inside of our cart, we need to display something. And if there's something in our cart, we need to display something, right? So I'm using if a lot, so that means we're going to use if statement to check if our cart has something. So if our cart length is equals to 0, then something must happen. And that something is we have to insert something inside of our cart elements. So if if not cut element, cut items element. So if there's something inside our cut, we need to insert it inside here, right? So by that, what does that mean? How does that look like? So if I say if the cut is empty, right? We need to cut items element. Remember, cut items element, we declared it here as our variable. And then we're going to get it by cut items. We're going to get that element by ID, which is cut items, which essentially we are targeting this. We're targeting this element right here. So cut items element dot. Now, because we need to basically create, and when I mean create, I mean dynamically create an element to display each item inside the cart, or rather display a message if there are no items inside the cart. So we need to insert an element right there. And how we insert it, or we're gonna say cart items element dot inner HTML. And what is that inner HTML? So I'm gonna have a string basically. I'm inserting a p tag. Right? So if there are no items inside the cart, we're inserting a p tag to say that no items in the cart, right? And then, but what if there is something inside the cart? So we'll have an else statement, and then we need to, then now we need to remove, okay, we're gonna say inner HTML, and then just have an empty string like that, right? Basically it clears it means that there are items in the cart, so remove the initial message to say there are no items in the cart, right? So but that's not it. We want more. We want to be able to display the items in the cart. So what we have to do now is we have to go, who has the items is the cart array. So we have to go inside the cart array, and then we're going to use my friend for each method. And then we're going to pass item as our parameter. So basically, we're going to loop inside our cart array, and then we're going to pull each item. Nah? And then what are we doing with this item? What are we doing with the items that we're pulling? So before we answer that question, we need to have, huh? We need to insert something because this is empty. Ah. Before we do that, basically we need to capture the details of the item and then insert them in an element and then render or display that element inside our web. Um inside the web, right? So, but before we do that, we need to create this element dynamically. So I will say const declare variable, call it cart item element. Um, Okay. So I'm gonna override the initial. I'm gonna override the initial cart item element, and then here I'm creating a new element. So basically I'm saying document.create element, and then what kind of element am I creating? I'm creating a div element. So it's kind of gonna be like a parent element, right? For our information. Voice is dying. So right now, this new div that we're creating, it's empty, it's blank, right? So we need to insert some elements inside of our parent div, our newly created parent div. But before we do that, we need to assign a class to it, right? So we're gonna say that this new cut item, let's give it a class. Let's give it a class. So I'll say class list dot add cut item like that, right? And then now that we have a class, or rather let's see how it looks like for those who might, or rather curious to see what it looks like. Or rather, when we create a new element, how does it look like? So let's click on this, right? So this is what it looks like. Now it's empty, it does not have any content, but we were able to assign a class to it, which is called item, right? So we do it good. Okay, remove that. Ooh, now we need to insert content inside this parent div. All right, so I'll say new card item dot inner HTML. So we need to insert elements inside here, but remember, we need to insert them dynamically. So the first element that I would insert inside our parent div is a span element, right? So what is the span element going to hold? Oh, by the way, what if let me try to zoom. This might hurt your eyes. This is not your usual string. Like I don't have something like this, like quotations. I forgot I forgot exactly what this is called, but I think it's called template literals, string template literals or something, right? So this is different as a normal string like wara 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 wara. The reason we use template literals is to make or rather to display our information dynamically, right? So if I have a span element right here, then here we want the name, right? So we're gonna say item dot name, the name of the item. So because the items have different names, we want to be able to display those names dynamically. So we can't just have product one, product one, product one like that. No, we need to have product one, product two, product three. And this is how we're going to display them dynamically by using these string literals or template literals. I really forget the word, right? And then additionally to the name, we're gonna add maybe in brackets. We're gonna add in brackets the quantity So we need to when we display dynamically, we add a dollar sign and curly braces, right? So we need to say item dot quantity. Now we will be able to see the name of the product and its quantity and the price. So I'll just have a dash right there and then dollar sign, curly braces, item dot product price. Is it product price or price? Mm. Let's see what's going on over here. Okay. So yeah, that's basically what we did. We just inserted our span element inside our parent div with the name product one, the quantity, and the price, right? So if I had product two, and then I have two products in the cart, which is product one, product two. Remember, I'm looping inside the cart. So this is why we're displaying two elements like this, or two parent elements like this. So now inside our card, I have product one and product two. Let's add product two again, see what happens. So it's still, we're not adding a third item. There's still two, but rather we just increase the quantity, which is here for product two, right? That's nice. That's pretty cool. So, okay, we're still doing the right things. And just remove that. We need to add one more. We need to add one more thing. And why do I say that? So let's say you are doing some grocery shopping and you add items there. You add wine, you add cheese, you add grapes, and then you go to the till and you just find out that, oops, maybe I am overspending. Maybe let me take out an item. So basically, you need to be able to remove an item from the cart, right? And how we're going to do that is we need to insert a button to be able to remove this thing or these items. So I'm gonna additionally have a button and I'm gonna give it a class of remove from cart. No? And then now how do we know which item to remove? We have to pass the ID. And then how are we gonna get that ID? We're gonna get that ID because we're gonna get that ID via the item that were uh the items that we receive inside our loop, right? So I'm gonna say item ID and remove. Basically this is just the label of the button, of the name of the button. And I have button there. Mm-hmm. 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 So now let's see what this bad boy looks like. There, we have our button for removal there. So we're good. All right. But something is missing. something is missing. As you can see, I'm adding items to cart, right? And we're able to know how many items we added to cart, but we still don't see those items here, right? So that means we're missing something. And what we can do is that um, we need to append. So what does append? It means that I have a cart item element, right? A new cart item element. However, it's not showing in the page yet. I cannot see it on the web yet, right? Why? It's because at this point, this cart item element is just a DOM object in the memory. So loads and converts the HTML document into a document object, right? So now we need to convert, we basically need to convert this object back to HTML, right? So that we can see it on the web. And that's basically what's happening is because what we see here, né, is basically what we see on the page, right? But some way, somehow, because now we are writing the code in JavaScript, we need to convert this sort of into JavaScript so that we can manipulate it, right? And then once we're done manipulating it, we need to throw it back to HTML. So now with cut items, because new cut items does not exist inside our document here. It does not exist anywhere inside our document. We need to now, once it's in document object, we need to convert it back to HTML document, or rather append it to the HTML document, meaning add it to the HTML document. All right. And for that, we're going to use append child method, right? So this method basically inserts that element into the page. This is how I think of it, right? So we will say new cart item dot append child, right? And then no, Ray, no, wait. No, no, I'm doing something wrong. I can't append child into child, man. Hmm, interesting. Support items element dot append child. Then let's append new card item. Let's see what happens here. Let's see what happens. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Okay. Let's clear up the confusion right now. Right. Um, remember this daemon that we initialized in the beginning? Yes. Uh, this is a variable that holds basically that holds this guy, this element, right? As we spoken. So now, because I've created a cart item, right? We've created a new cart item. We need to throw this cart item back to this daemon that we created right there. So we need to, so basically I'm saying cart items element, which is this tag, I mean this div, right? And then these new cart item right here, we're basically throwing it inside here. That's basically what we're doing. We are appending it in here. And that's basically what happened. The mistake that I almost made was I wanted to throw new card item inside new card item, which does not make sense. I needed to throw it back to the parent card items element right there. And that's basically what you're seeing right now, right here. All right. So this is where we at so far. Now we need to add functionality to our remove button because we're not doing anything. We're not removing our card items. So the last step now is to be able to remove our products or items in the cart. So that means that we need to have, oh, that means we're done with our update function, actually.
Caesar, Mr. Caesar,
Oh, hello, what's up?
Mr.
Uh,
Caesar, they are asking for a break, 5 minute break.
no, no break. I'm, I'm just kidding. Sorry about that. Yeah, we can be back at 10:50 then.
Okay, thank you for that, Caesar.
Yeah.
Okay, it's 10:50. Caesar, are you back? Or you never left? Hello, Caesar.
I'm up. I'm up. I just caught a power nap for 5 minutes.
Oh,
Ugh,
wow. That's
I'm
a
up.
boss move, most. Why
I
nap?
mean,
Wow.
I had to sleep just
All
for,
right.
yeah.
By a show of hands, who's back? All right. Thank you so much. You can lower your hands. CJ, you can now proceed.
Okay. I'm just gonna give an overview what we've been busy with so far. So just so far, right? The objective was to ensure that the objective was to add items in the cart, right? And then once those items have been added, we need to be able to count how many items are in the cart and display the total count right here. And then additionally, we were once items are added to cart, we need to display which of those items are added to cart and display the English bundles. Oh, display the quantity of those items, right? Etc. etc. So now the last thing that we have to do is to ensure is to add a logic or functionality to say that when we remove an item, it must be removed from here. So what we're gonna do now is that we're gonna have a we're gonna have a create rather a remove item function, right? So for those of you who don't know this, but you don't have to know this now, I'm just telling you this just in case one of the facilitators decides to be naughty in your interviews, right? And then they ask you a question along these lines. What we've been doing so far is what we called what basically is crude functions or crude operations. But let's say crude functions for now. And what the C stands for is that the C stands for creating something, right? And this is create or add, right? So we've covered the C, and then the R, which is read, right? So we don't have a read function per se, but we have logic where we able to read, right? Because now we're using HTML, yeah. But we don't have a function for read, but it falls under CRUD, right? Basically being able to read the data that we've either created or updated, right? And then we have view, which is for update. Now we do have an update function right here, right? And that is basically to update or manipulate the data or the information that we already have. In this case, the information or the data that is in the cart, right? We're able to update them by changing adding items into the cart, therefore updating the cart array and manipulating the quantity, etc., etc. And then we have lastly this one, um, which is delete, right? So delete, same as remove, removing items from the cart, right? So this is basically crude operations right there. And moving forward, crude operations is mainly the I forgot the word, so whatever I'm gonna say does not make sense. But moving forward, you need to be able to create items, create data, whatever. You need to be able to manipulate that data. You need to be able to read that data, and you need to be able to delete that data. Once you understand crude operations or crude functions, I swear you're gonna go a long way into web development, software development, etc., because basically a lot the as a programmer, a lot of the times you're creating, you're reading, you're updating, and you're deleting. So once you understand crude operations or crude functions, you're gonna go a long way, right? So with that being said, I'm just gonna remove this because yeah, I just gave you guys insights. I just gave you guys some dark magic insights, and I don't want to be responsible for that. You didn't get that from me, by the way. I hope you guys can keep a secret. So now let's have a function for remove item. And then let's pass an ID, a product ID. And then what we need to do basically now is that not yesterday, Wednesday, all right? There was this method that we used to remove items from a cart. Very interesting one. And that method is filter. So what are we going to do? We're going to use the filter method to remove items from the cart, right? And how are we going to do that? Because we've already declared cart here. Yeah, we're just going to call it, we're just going to reassign cart to a value, an array value, right? Because remember, the filter returns a new array. So we're going to have a product as our parameter. Then we have product.id will be equals no. So essentially what's happening here is that we're gonna return elements that meet this condition right here. So essentially if let's say we have three products, we have all these three products in the array, and I want to remove this one right here. Essentially, I'm gonna pass the ID of product 2, né? In our function. And then how the filter is gonna work is that we're gonna loop through every item in the array, and then we're gonna look at product IDs, the IDs, I mean the item IDs. And then we're gonna compare all the item IDs with the product ID. Product ID meaning the ID that we just selected. And then if there is no match, right? If the IDs are not the same, then we return that item. So if I have a product ID of product 2 is 2, né? So it's gonna go through this one, and the ID of this one is 1. So it's not a match. So we return this one. And then this one is a match. So we remove it. And then this one is not a match, so return it. And that's basically what is happening here in the filter, right? So now that we have that, we have to update the card. Why? Because we are changing something in the card, and therefore once something is changed, it has to be updated, right? So, Mr. Seasway, why aren't you passing an ID inside update? The reason why I'm not passing ID inside update is because remember, inside update, we're saying that we were inside update, we're checking the card length, right? And then if the card length is not zero, we are looping inside the card array. And then from there, we're able to get any item that we want just by this loop. And then we'll be able to identify any item that we want. So meaning that if we call meaning that if we call card update card item, essentially what's going to happen is that when we remove, item, when we call this function, we're going to remove something from the card, and then the card variable has a new value, right? And then we call update card. So now this new value, what happens is it's gonna check here. It's gonna start here, and then it's gonna go into cart. It's gonna check if it's gonna basically loop through the cart and sum up all the how many items we have inside that cart. And then if it's zero, then it's fine. Then it's fine, right? It's zero. But now and then we're gonna have to declare that there are no items in the cart if the card length is zero. But if there is something in the cart, if there's still something in the cart after removing, then we're going to loop through in the new cart, right? And do the same thing that we did, meaning that we're going to return this new cart item. What is this? Div, and then append the child, etc., etc. So that's why we're not passing any ID to it, right? But let's see if this is working. Yo, go see him. Okay.
Please,
So
right?
yeah,
Do you want to take questions or you're good for now?
let me finish.
Okay.
And then let's add these three. And then let's see what happens when I remove. It's not working. Oh, I didn't call it. So I didn't call it. So I declared my function right here, but I'm not using it. I'm not calling it. So how do I call it now? I need to ensure that every time the remove button is clicked, the newly declared button or created button is clicked, right? I need to add an event listener to it. But now, no, but now if I have, let's say, three remove buttons, right? That means I have to loop through all these, I have to loop through all of this. So what are we going to do with that is we're going to use our old friend document dot query selector all, right? And we're going to use our class of remove card, right? And then we're going to, because this returns a node list, right? It returns a node list, which is sort of like an array. We can use dot for each to loop through it, right? So what are we looping? We're looping through each button, right there. And then once we get the button, once we get the buttons, we need to add a listener event to it. And what kind of event? It's a click event, meaning that every time we click this button, something should happen. In this case, we need to remove the item. We need to call this this function right here, remove item. But something is missing. We need to pass an argument because here we declared a parameter, so we're expecting an argument right here. And what are we gonna pass? We need to pass the ID of the item that we clicked on. And so now, where do we get this product ID? Where do we get this product ID? This product ID, we get it from, remember, we get it from here. Remember, when we created our button element, we also said it has to have a data ID attribute. So we're gonna say button dot get attribute data attribute. So essentially, what's gonna do, we're gonna select this button right here and get the date, not get the ID of that button. And that ID, what we're passing here, meaning that this ID corresponds to the ID of the item, right? So now we can pass product ID here. We can pass product ID here, all right? So let's go through that again. We are still inside the else block, right? Meaning that the card length is not 0. And then essentially what we're saying is that since the card length is not 0, meaning that we have this inside our HTML document, right? Or on the page, on the web. So meaning that now we're going to all the select all the elements with this class remove from card, right? And then because this returns a node list, which is like an array kind, we're able to use for each to loop through that list, right? And then this basically returns button. It basically returns this. So we're gonna have a list of these buttons, right? Remove from cart. And then we're gonna say that each button, inside each button, for each button, we add an event listener, a click event, right? And once we click this button or these buttons, we need to get the ID of these buttons, the ID that was passed in these buttons. And how we're going to get that is we're going to get the attribute of the button, which is the data ID. And then we're going to get the product ID. So basically so since we are passing the ID of the item, essentially now we know that this is the product ID, right? And then we pass that product ID as an argument in when we call our remove item function, right? And then that's how we're going to be able to filter out our cart. So let's see if that is working. Let's see. Add to cart, add to cart, add to cart. And let's remove, right? Now we're able to remove. Let's add again. Remove, remove. So right now, what we're doing is that we're removing the entire item, right? We're not just removing one. And I did this for basically for my voice is betraying me. I did it for simplicity's sake, right? So, yeah, that's just basically it right there. That's basically adding some interactions, into our HTML and CSS, making the web app a little bit more interactive, etc., etc. And that's how we use JavaScript to make it our web interactive and yeah. Whew, my voice. Yeah, Mahlatsi, the questions that you were talking about.
All right. We have a hand up. Um, we can take a question from Katleho. Yes, Katleho. Katleho, may you please unmute from your side?
Isn't that an old hand when we came back?
They've been putting their hands up and yeah. Okay, do we have any questions besides the Q&A? Okay, I think Policy answered a few questions on the chat, on the Q&A. Okay, we have a hand up, you see. Katleho. Yes, Katleho. We have Katleho and Katleho's hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Katleho.
All right. Can you please navigate to the removing button? The section where you are removing button. Yeah, right there. What I wanted to understand is that if maybe you have added three items to a cart for 3 items inside a cart for one product, can you remove one by one or?
The code that we currently have, it does not remove one by one, but we can
Yeah,
huh?
yeah. I was asking if there a code that you can write so that you can remove one by one. If you remove, then the quantity decreases until they are all removed.
Okay. That means
Okay.
hello?
Hello, I can hear you.
Yeah.
All right.
Was someone else speaking?
No, it's been Katleho speaking. I don't know what's happening on his end. All right. We can move on to Mkolisi.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh no, I just wanted to just chip in with what Katlego is saying. I think the only thing that would change, since we are once again calling the updates function, the only thing that would change, it would be maybe instead of using a filter to just first check if the what the item that is being removed, if it has more than one in terms of quantity, then we just reduce the quantity. Then if the quantity is at one, then we can just remove it. I don't know if that makes sense. But and I don't think a lot will change.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks, Mkolisi. I don't think we have any questions for you, Sizwe. You can proceed.
So for when do I have to give you guys a task? Mm. The next task is going to be pretty demanding, and because I was thinking about it, and initially what I wanted to do was I wanted to give you guys initial code for HTML and CSS, right? And then have you guys just include JavaScript only. But I thought about it, and actually, Xolisi's actually what he raised earlier on made me more think about it more, is that maybe I should let you guys do the HTML and CSS part of it alone so that I don't restrict you to a certain approach. And I guess once you start seeing what the task is about, maybe you'll understand why. Because if I include HTML and CSS, the HTML is going to box you into a certain approach, right? And you might you might do it one way or the other, but it's going to limit you. However, if you do HTML on your own and have the CSS on your own, then I guess there's no limit to what you can do, etc., etc., right? So I've decided that for this project, you guys are going to add HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So this helps you to revisit some of the concepts on HTML and improve on them, and CSS as well. And also now with the new twist of JavaScript, right? And everything that we've learned. And let's see what you are gonna come up with, right? So that means that Vugona, when is Node? Or Matlat, when is the planned date for Node?
Um, Hi. So Node is going to be next week, second session next week, and then the following week.
Which week? I mean, which day next week? Wednesday or Thursday?
Think it's Thursday.
Yes, it's Thursday because on Wednesday we have the web hosting.
Also, we have another session on Wednesday.
Yes.
So, with that being said, if my team agrees, if they don't had like sore, it wasn't me. You know who it was. I was gonna suggest that the deadline for the incoming task should be Wednesday morning at 9 to give you guys some time to, like don't do everything in a rush. Like literally be deliberate in learning all these concepts. Don't do anything in a rush and just understand every line of code that you're writing. So I would say that Wednesday morning you guys submit this task right here. And then yeah. But if my team agrees, if they don't ask us, so I guess that communication you will receive later on today as to when are the due dates. But yeah, my team and I will have to discuss it. But otherwise, I am tapped out. Um, yeah, this is probably the last time you're gonna hear my voice. This is where it ends for me, guys. And yeah, hope you guys have learned something. And yeah, see you on the other side. Atlati,
Yes, Caesar.
over to you, ma'am. I bow out. I'm done. Thank you,
You're
everyone.
done. That
Me?
that was quick.
Quick, it's a Friday, girl. Come on. I need to
Oh
do
my
my nails.
word.
Do my nails.
Okay.
I
All
need to,
right. All right.
yeah.
Do we have any questions for Caesar for the session? Because this is the last time you hear from him besides on Slack. All right. Karabo, yes.
Good day, sesizwe.
Hey, my G, good day, sir. How are you?
Mnandi, sir. Sir, I would want you to reshuffle, go back and explain. I want to understand because this is the last time. I want to understand, Prasizwe.
This guy. It's a Friday. Well, what is he doing? What is he talking about?
Prasizwe, come on,
I have
please,
to do
bro.
my nails, like I have to do my nails, my
Nails.
weave. I need to
You
buy.
need
Anyway, yeah.
what buffing and shining.
Yeah.
Oh my word.
So what's up, Karabo? What did you need? What do you need?
I wanted you, Prasizo, to just kindly please just go through the code, explain on how this is done, how this is done, how this is done, because I'm struggling to somehow understand. I can understand, but some things they just slip away kancane nyana, yabona.
Which location did you register to?
It's funny.
Tshwane.
Yeah.
You better pray that I'm not in the interview. Okay. Let's start.
Yes.
So, first of all, before we write any code, let's understand what our objectives are. Now
Yes, sir.
we have three or four objectives right here. The first
Mhm.
objective is that when we add, okay, let me do this. Let me just- mm, The, the first objective is that we have products here. The e-commerce site, right? Where there are products for sale, right? So we have product one, two, and three. Now we we need to be able when a user must be able to come onto the site and add a product to cart, right? So that's the first objective. We need to be
Yes.
able to add products into the cart.
Yes.
And then the second objective is that the user must be able to keep track of how many items are in the cart, which are displayed here.
Okay.
Rude. Uh, right. And then the third objective is that the user must be able to view um the items that they put on the card, right? So if you put product one for your lady, you must able to see what we bought product one for this price and the quantity as well, right? And then
Yes.
lastly, the last objective is to be able to remove those items from the cart, right?
Yes, sir.
So you say I don't want this shirt anymore, can check it out, right? So
Yeah.
those are the four objectives that we need. Then when we start, we need to say we have to have a cart, right? So we
Yes, sir.
declare a variable cart and assign an empty array. Because
Yes.
initially, when you get into the store, your cart is empty. You don't just get in there with something inside, right? Unless you're the
Yes.
devil. Now, inside our index.html, again, now we have this in HTML code. And
Yes,
then
sir.
we have our navigation, which you don't make use of except this. And then we have uh card count. Okay, card count element, right? Remember the first not the first objective, but we need to be able to change um the count. So if one item is in the cart, this has to change to one, etc., etc. Now, since there's nothing in the cart, it's zero, right? So now we need to pull this element right here on our JavaScript, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
so that we are able to manipulate it. And how we do that, we get that element by the ID. Now, what's the ID name? The ID name of this element is card count. So when we're
Yeah.
putting it by its ID and then we're passing the ID, which is card count, do this as a string. Additionally, now we need to keep track of the card items in the array, right?
Okay.
So by keeping track of that, meaning that we have to be able to display those card items in the array. Now for
Yeah.
that, we already have something here, which is cart items, right? But it
Yes.
only has one element inside, a child element, which is basically empty, right? So this is basically a parent, if you can call it that. So we need to pull this div element by its
Okay.
ID, cart items. Um, and then so when we pull it here, right, basically we have access to this on our JavaScript. We have access to
Okay.
something like this, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, and what am I thinking? So when that's done, our first objective is to add to cart.
Mhm.
So we have this now. We have our product container, and
Mhm.
then product where we have our
Ah,
product that you saw now. So
Yes.
now what since we're adding to cart, what we're really interested in is this button. So we're gonna use this button. This button
Mm.
is sort of like our Trojan horse. So we
Yeah.
need we need this information, but we're gonna use since we are clicking on this button, we're gonna use this button as a Trojan horse. So we need to get this button right here. But we don't
Yeah.
just get this button. We need to get every button that has a class of add to cart.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Then we say,
Yes.
okay, for that we'll use the query select.
Okay.
So we say document. Document basically refers to this thing now. But I get this thing, this HTML document is converted to a document object, right? So that's
Yes.
why we say document dot query selector all because we want all those buttons with the class add to cart. Now, because this guy basically returns a node list, and then a node list is some form of an array, right?
Yeah. Yes.
We we're gonna loop through that guy. I mean that I say this in quotation marks, that array, but we're gonna use dot for each, right?
Yeah.
Now, also remember when we use dot for loop right here, the reason why we're not using for loop like this is because
Mm.
of we do not know how many buttons are there. There could be 100, right? So when we
Yes.
use for loop is when we are certain of the length of the array or what we're looping through. But here we're not certain. So that's we use dot for each. Now also dot for each, like I said, it's cleaner way of looping through an array. And we're going to do the same thing to each item. So we're not adding any crazy logic or manipulating, etc. Right?
Okay.
Now
Yes.
we're passing our button parameter, right? So this is basically the button that we got. So let's say we're looping, we got these guys and we put them in an array, right? So now we
Yeah.
have an array of buttons. Think of it like that. We have an array of buttons. So
Okay.
then we have say button. Now that we have our button, when we click on this button, we need to add an event, right? An event listener. And what kind of event listener are we adding? It's a click, meaning that
Right.
when we click on that button, something must happen, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
this is the syntax basically. We will say that inside of our button, add
Mm-hmm.
an add a click event listener, right? And
Yes.
once that button is clicked, add this logic that inside
Okay.
here, right? So what is
Yeah.
this logic when we click? What we now again we have access to the button. Now we are inside. We are phakathi inside. We are
Yeah.
phakathi inside here. Now we must get this product card as a whole.
Okay.
So now that's how we get it, product card. So we say button dot closest. So basically we're saying that find the closest parent of product card. Basically, it can be like a way to think of it, you know? It's like actually, I'm not sure if this is gonna make sense. Let's say uh it's Christmas and then you have relatives over, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then because you are a child in that family, you are inside, there's the head and then there's you guys. So
Yeah.
basically, button the closest basically means that find find someone who has the most similar DNA to Karab, who is the closest person to this Karab.
Yeah. Kahle find the parent of
Find the
Karab.
parent. Yes, find the parent, right? So here, so now we say that the button here, the closest parent element, div element of button is product
Yeah.
card. So we want the closest. So it's product card right here. And that's why we're passing it here, right?
Yeah.
So what this is basically gonna do, right? It's gonna give us the whole thing, right? Now we have the whole product card.
Uh,
And then once we have that, we need to have once we have the product barking, once we have the product card, all of it, now we can get the product ID.
yeah.
We pass product card and then we get the attribute. So uh this is product card, right? So how we get the ID is that this is an attribute right here. So for
Yeah.
this product, this is its ID right here. And that's
Okay.
how basically we get the ID. So we say product card dot get attribute, and then we pass the attribute data ID. So
Okay.
now we got the ID. Now we need the name and the price. Because
Yeah.
remember, the product must have a name and must have a price.
Mm-hmm.
So now we use query selector. Now, query selector isn't is is not it doesn't perform the same as query selector all.
Oh,
So
yeah.
query selector, we are passing a tag, right?
Yeah.
In this case,
Yeah.
we're passing an H3. And then basically it says that Anisho now we're saying inside product card, find me an H3. But it does not say any H3. It says find me the first H3 that you find.
Yes.
So it goes inside here and it says, the first H3 I find is this one. So
Mm.
it returns it like this. But we don't want this and we don't want this element. We
Yeah.
want the name,
So
what inside.
text.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why we say dot inner text. The
Mm-hmm.
same with the product price, because product price has a p tag. So because we want the inside, we're gonna say dot inner text. Then we got the information we want from product card. And then we're gonna put it inside a product. We're gonna put this inside an product
Yeah.
object. And then
Yes.
we're gonna have a property of ID. and then we're gonna pass a value of product ID, and then we're
Okay.
gonna have property of name and pass product name. We're gonna have a property of price and pass product price, quantity, and then because quantity initially is one, so when you add an item in the cart, initially you're adding one thing. So initially we set the quantity to one.
Yeah.
So, okay, but still at this point, we still are not able to add to cart, right? So that
Yeah.
means we need to now we got the information that we want. Now we need to add that information so that we're able to add to cart. So that's where we write a function to add to cart.
Yeah.
We have everything that we need. Now let's add to cart. So we have a product parameter here. No?
Yeah.
Basically, it's gonna give us this product here, whatever that we
Yeah.
pass it. Yeah. And then, firstly, we need to check if an item already exists in a cart. By that,
Okay.
before we're adding an item. So I go there, I have a cart, and I'm going around the shop, and I see a sneaker. I pick it up. Before I
Mm.
throw it in the cart, I check if I have any sneaker, right? So basically,
Yeah.
that's what your code is checking if there's this gold sneaker inside the cart, right? So that's what this basically is happening. It's basically looping inside our cart array, and it
Mm.
says find any item, right, with this
Mm.
product ID. So if product one has an ID of one, we're gonna go inside our cart, we're gonna loop through inside our cart, and if we find an item that has the same ID as product one, then it means that item already exists in the cart, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But but if if that item does not exist, then this should return undefined right here. So cut item will be undefined. So we say, okay, so that means that there's two scenarios. There's a scenario where a cut item is found, and there's a scenario where cut item is not found. So how
Mm.
do we handle those two scenarios? If statement.
Mm.
So we say if the product already exists in the card, we'll just
Yeah.
increment the quantity.
Okay.
And then if it does not exist,
Yeah.
we add that item in the card.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Now that means that our function is done. Our function is done to this point, right? So now we go back to our click event, our button click event, and then we
Mm-hmm.
just call the function add to cart, and then we pass the product that was selected, or rather that was clicked on, and then
Yeah.
yeah, right?
Oh,
Okay, now
yes.
we're able to add to cart. It's fine. However, at this point we're still not seeing anything inside our code, but we can see that the cart array is being populated.
Mm.
So that means we're still good. Now, but our none of our the first objective is done. Add to cart. The first objective is that. The second objective is to ensure that we're able to see the number of the sum of all the items in the cart. So now means we have to update. We have to update our HTML, right?
Yes.
So remember, since our second objective is to ensure that we get the sum of the card count, and this
Yeah.
is the guy that we already declared here. Now we bring him back into the equation and we say, hey, my G, I want what's inside, right? Which is
Yeah.
the text.
Yes.
And I'm gonna or reassign a value to this text, meaning that I'm gonna loop inside our cart. I'm gonna get inside our cart and I'm gonna add the total items in this cart. Remember we did this reduce thing. This
Yeah.
reduce and how it works. So basically, we're getting a sum of all the items in the cart, right?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So now we're able to do that, right? Now this guy, when we add into the cart, he he has value, but we're still not able to see that value at this point. So now
Yeah.
we say, okay, there are two scenarios where either this guy, either the cart, if there's nothing inside the cart, this guy is gonna be zero, or rather no items in the array, and then therefore zero. Or if there's items in the cart, then this guy is gonna have a value, and something like this is gonna happen. So how do we
Okay.
handle those scenarios if else? So we say
Yeah.
if the length of the card is zero, right?
Yeah.
Now we're bringing another guy that we declared earlier on, which is the card items element. But this guy is the parent of card items,
Mm-hmm.
which is this one, right?
Yeah.
So we're saying that this parent is gonna have a child, which is a p tag that no there are no items in the cart if
Yeah.
the cart length is zero, né? However, if there is something in the cart, this parent right there of cart items has no kid, has no child, né? Or remove
Yeah.
that child.
Mm.
And then we're gonna loop inside our cart using for
Yes.
each. Mhm. So remember now, inside our cart, we have an item, and this item is
Yeah.
an object, right? So we
Yes.
say, okay, now we are inside the cart. What do? We need to create a new item. That means that instead of giving this parent a no items in the cart baby, we need to
Mm.
give him a new baby now. That baby must have clothes. Basically, if there are no items in the cart, this parent is giving birth to a stillborn.
Yeah.
It's a bad joke, but yeah, I'm trying to. But if there are items in the element, then we're giving them a baby who's alive, right? So
Yeah.
let's create this baby. Or now this baby is gonna have a div, right? So we're
Okay.
creating a new div. And then inside that div, we are adding a class, meaning we're giving that baby a name, sort of, an identifier.
Yeah.
And then now we are adding. So now at this point, the baby looks like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we need to add content now. And then we need to add content. So how we add content? We add a span, right?
Okay.
Meaning, yeah, we need to add a span. So basically, this is an element right there
Mm.
inside this div element that we just created. So that's why we say new card item dot inner HTML like that. So we add this element, which is a span element, and then inside the span element, we are passing the name of the item that we just added,
Yes.
the quantity, and the price.
Yeah.
All right. So are we displaying it? Okay, we're not displaying it at this point. Hmm, maybe let me log. Do you understand what's going on, or should I
Yeah.
continue to?
I know. I understand. Can continue, sir?
So in addition to the span element, we add a button for remove.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this button, we're giving it a class to the class of remove from cart.
Yes.
In addition to that class, we add an attribute data ID, right? And then
Yeah.
that attribute, we're giving it a value, or like we're passing a value of item.id. So we're saying that this remove button must have an ID of the item. You get? So when we click on it, we should be able to pull the item ID,
Okay.
Trojan horse kind of thing. You see it?
Yeah.
So, okay, but at this point, né? At this point, we are only able to add this new cut item. At this point, it's a document object, right? It's
Yes.
not an HTML document. It's a document
Yeah.
object. So now we have to now go back to now we're saying, hey, Mrs. Parent, here's your baby,
Yeah.
right? Append
Yeah.
append this into
To
the cut items parent.
yeah.
Basically, is this one? Huh? Yeah, it's this one.
Yeah.
So we are appending the child. So by appending the child, think of it as the child at this point is in a document object. Now we're converting that child into HTML document so that we're able to see on the web, right?
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, cool. Um, Now at this point, that is our update function. So
Yeah.
because when we add to cart, we're modifying the cart. So we call update function inside our add to cart, right? So now we
Okay.
see if our objective is true, okay? So our objective to show this the number of cart items is good, and then we're able to display our cart items, right? So the mother now has two products, whatever. Right. Now our last objective is to add function to remove the cart items from the cart.
Mm.
So before now we implement that object, I mean that logic, let's think about it for a second. That means I have to have a function. And that
Yeah.
function, when I remove an item from a cart, it by that it means I'm updating, right?
Mm.
So that means I have to call update function inside remove item function. And that's why we're calling it. But even if I call it now, I'm not updating anything. I'm just calling the update function, right? So now I
Yeah.
need to add, when I remove from cart, what am I updating? I'm updating the cart because I'm removing
Yeah.
something from the cart. So I say, okay, since I have the cart variable, I don't have to declare it again. I can just reassign it. So I can just say cart is equals to, right? Now, what is the most cleanest way to remove an item from an array? Filter.
Like
We use a
filter.
filter method, right?
Yeah.
Now we can say, okay, so filter method basically is gonna loop through the array, right? And then because our array is products, we pass product parameter like that, right? Or declare parameter like that. And then now we say that we're gonna measure with the ID. We're gonna use the ID as the identifier. So we'll
Yeah.
say that. And remember now our remove item we have product ID as a parameter. We declare a parameter, product ID. No? So we're
Yeah.
gonna use the product inside of the cart. We say that the product ID inside of the cart
Yes.
is not equals to the product ID that we're passing, meaning the product ID of the item that we're removing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
basically, what should be returned here? What should be returned is anything that does not match this condition. So if the product ID in the cart does not match the product ID that was selected, return that product, meaning leave that
Okay.
product in the cart.
Yeah.
But if this condition fails, then it means that remove that product. So meaning
Mm-hmm.
that if they are equal, remove that product. from the cart. And
Yeah.
then now update now because now cart is it has a new value. It has a new array.
Yeah.
Now we can update. So now that means what's going to happen is once this function is called, we're going to go back to our update um, function. And then we're going to say, okay, so what is since now this guy the cut array has been updated, what is the cut count? What are the sum of items in the cart? And then we do that based on the new value of cart, right? And then we
Yeah.
say, okay, so is cart empty? If cart is empty, then we remove, we take the babies from that cart items element, like, hey, siyakuthathela, right?
Yeah.
But if there are still items in the cart, then we say, okay, let us cook your babies. Let us make some changes. And then we loop inside the new cart array. And then we do the same thing. We create the new element, div element, and then we add a class to it, and then etc. etc. So every time you call update function, this is gonna happen. But now we are calling update inside the remove item, right? So
Yeah.
that means we must add a logic. Now we just have the function for remove item. We're not handling the event when we click remove item. We're not
Mm.
handling the event. And therefore, we need to add an event listener. But before we add an event listener, we need to get all those buttons for remove cart. And what do we use? We use query selector all, and then we pass in the class, this class
Okay.
remove item. So we're gonna grab every but we're gonna grab every element with this class right here. So because
Mm.
it's just this button, and remember, query selector all returns node list. So it's a form of kind of an array. So we're gonna
Yeah.
loop through it, and then we're gonna get the button, and then we're gonna add an event listener to that button. What event listener? A click event listener. And then we
Mm.
say, when we click, okay, now we are in the remove item, né? Because we want to remove an item. So when we click, what must happen? Firstly, we need to get the ID of the button that was clicked.
Yeah.
And how do we get that ID? That ID, we get it by its attribute right here. And the
Yeah.
value of that ID will be the ID of the item.
Yeah.
So meaning that if we click on this item, the remove button will have the ID of that item. So we say, okay, now that we have the ID, we can pass that ID as an argument
Okay.
for when we call remove item. So now essentially what's going to happen is that we're going to pass this guy right here, which is this guy. We're getting it from here. And
Yeah.
then we're gonna do that whole filtering. And then we have the new card array, right? Then we
Mhm.
call update. Then inside update, we're gonna do all of that. And then we're gonna say, oops, we have this now. So now we're gonna run, etc., etc.
Okay.
So understanding how and when to call functions might be the trickiest part of understanding um, JavaScript.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that is the only thing. You see, even here, Mr. Caesar, you see, even where you say you pass just go Pezulu. What's that? I can see here you say item dot name. You see that is confusing me because um
Mhm.
items dot name, why didn't we say product dot name. Because the our conjures that thing our object is product, not item. So that was confusing me. That item product.
Yeah, interchangeable. So
Oh
remember, yeah, interchangeable. So remember, I declared the parameter as item, meaning that
yeah.
that parameter item, it's only relevant inside here. But even if I change the name and I say product,
Okay.
it will still do the same thing. It's
Oh,
we are still pointing to the items inside of the cart. So it
okay.
doesn't change anything. It's even if I can say Sizwe, I say
Yeah.
Sizwe name, Sizwe the quantity, it will still point to cart the items or the elements in the cart. So it's just
Oh,
and that's also why to avoid confusing yourself when you're writing code, you must be careful with naming variables or when you
yeah.
define variables, just be careful so that you don't get lost. You check what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So yeah, that one was just a matter of renaming the parameter or defining the parameter in another way.
Okay.
So sure, yeah.
So that item was like we were using it just like I mean we were using it as a placeholder of the object of the
Yeah.
product object.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Now I understand.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No, thank you, Mr. Caesar. Thank
Hey,
you. Enjoy your Friday.
you're in Pretoria. You owe me 2 beers. I'm just kidding. Yeah. All right. We
Excuse
don't
me,
have.
we left with 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think we can't take any more questions. We can now just take all the questions to Slack and then we will answer those questions on Slack. Are you okay with that,
We can
Mr.
answer.
Caesar?
We can answer one question if it's a brief. If I don't have to go through the code, we can answer quickly. But
Okay.
but if there are many questions, then obviously when I have to go to Slack because yeah,
Yeah, we're looking at the time now.
yeah.
Mm, okay, between Frank or Katlego.
I think Frank was first before he raised his hand down. I mean,
Okay.
put his hand down.
All right, Frank.
Hi everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Caesar, just a quick question. I'm always struggling with this because okay, just two questions. So the first one is how much comments are too much and how much comments are not enough? Because I can understand that in a sense when you're in a teaching setting, you obviously going to have like a lot of comments for us to understand. But like a working environment, how much comments are too much and how much are not enough?
It depends on the team and etc. Me personally, nah, when I'm working with people, and even I tell my trainees at CodeTribe that I don't want to see comments in your code. The reason why I don't want to see comments, unless it's a comment like this, but the reason why I don't want to see comments is that the code is not nice. It's not pretty, you know? And something for console.log like this, it means that you wanted to debug something or you wanted to see what's happening in your code at that point in time. But when you're done, just remove it. I didn't remove it for the purpose of this, what is this? For the purpose of this session. But if you are in a professional setting, remove this thing. We don't need it. It's not doing anything. And then you find people that leave console logs in their code. And now you start running their code. And on the terminal, there's a lot of information. You don't even know where it's coming from, why, etc., etc. So I just console log, remove, comments, remove, unless you wrote a complicated code that maybe your colleagues, some people allow comments because it helps, it's easier to understand the code, right? So, for example, you write the code and then I'm working on that code now. So I'm like, hey, what was this guy doing to add to cart? And then I see, okay, the purpose of this is to avoid duplicates and increase quantity. Then I'm like, oh, okay, so that's why he's doing this. Okay, that's fine. I understand, you know. Some people allow it, some people don't allow it, but those that don't allow it is to protect the the integrity of the code and the cleanliness of the code. That's why they don't allow it. For some people, they don't care. As long as the code is working, you can have comments all you want. So also when you're in CodeRive, you're gonna be if you have comments, chances are your facilitator is gonna let me keep quiet before I reveal secrets. Yeah, sure.
Those are the secrets we want to know. Okay, so the last question, just so we're going to be using the Marin stack. I understand because from what I'm seeing here, it seems like that's what we're going to be using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay, all right,
sure.
thank you.
We're out of time, guys. Guess we'll have to go to Slack. Askisi. Askisi.
All right, yes, we are out of time. We are like 2 minutes over. So this is the end of the session. You're good, Caesar, right?
Not good. I need to prepare my voice, but if they good, I'm good.
All right. So can you just direct your questions on Slack? We'll answer you on Slack. And then you will receive further communication from me. There's no task, Caesar.
Now there will be later today. I'll have to write up the document and
All right.
I guess you know how we usually do it later in the day.
Yeah. Okay. So
The,
you'll receive a task.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and the deadline, I'm saying Wednesday morning, but I guess that will also be communicated when we send when we release the task.
The deadline, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then please wait for my messages or emails. You'll get the task, you'll get the video. We are just preparing them for you. So please, please, please don't ask about the task in the video until you get some sort of communication from me. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next session, which will be on Wednesday. So there's no session on Monday, there's no session on Tuesday. Our next session will be on Wednesday. So please bear that in mind. I will also try to set up a reminder for you guys so that you don't forget that there's a session on Wednesday. And then, yeah, direct your messages on Slack and then we'll attend to you. Thank you so much for joining the session and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.